So we are watching this developing story tonight about the Washington Free Beacon and their funding of the early stages of the opposition research that was done into the Trump campaign and apparently, according to the reports that we're hearing tonight, other GOP campaigns as well in the early stages of the primary and through the beginnings of the Trump candidacy after he achieved that nomination. We know that in 2016, that funding was picked up by Democratic entities and was funneled through the D.C. attorney, according to reports, Mark Elias, for the Clinton campaign and the DNC, although none of them have fessed up to having knowledge of those payments or being aware that they were funding that research through Fusion GPS and ultimately leading to some Kremlin contacts as well, who were digging up dirt ultimately on President Trump. So a lot of developments in this story tonight. So we're going to turn Howie Kurtz to this as we bring him in this evening on this breaking news, host of MediaBuzz. Howie, in terms of the Washington Free Beacon and why they would be funding this research, what can you tell us?
Well, this is an extraordinary development, Martha, just as we were getting used to the fact that it was the Democrats and Hillary Clinton's campaign that was funding this research later that led to the infamous dossier. I have a lot of respect for Matthew Continetti, who runs that site, but this is not what journalists do. They dig into things, they publish them, they don't hire opposition research firms, and they don't act like politicians or political operatives. So this is a real blow to that publication, which is small but has an important following here in Washington. Yeah, I mean, they put out a statement that they basically have, done that they do talk to opposition firms. And what was pointed out earlier in this discussion is the sort of the links of Fusion GPS, which is a very controversial group that was started by a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, but that they have done a lot of work on behalf of the Kremlin in terms of pushing for things that the Kremlin wanted, such as the repeal of the Magnitsky Act, which was a sanction against Vladimir Putin and a lot of the sort of high wealth cronies of Vladimir Putin who were hit hard by sanctions after the death of Sergei Magnitsky. And, you go through the rest of this story, Howie, and you go to the point where you have the Magnitsky Act being argued in front of Donald Trump Jr. And all of that. So the Fusion GPS is tied to all of that. They also have taken the fifth in front of Congress. So when you look at all the tentacles here, with the Washington Free Beacon pulled into the mix of this, as you're getting it all in there, what does it tell you? Well, it tells me that, we live in such a polarized culture now that something that is marketed itself as a news organization. Look, journalists go out and dig up dirt from sources, sometimes shadowy sources all the time. But to pay for it with an opposition research firm that itself is very controversial and secretive undercuts its credibility and it makes the whole thing into kind of a soap opera. I think people won't know what to believe. Yeah. And you look, as you say, at the story this week that the DNC paid for it, and now you've got this division, sort of dividing line in whose interest, who Fusion GPS was getting paid by a lot of people, apparently. That much we know at this point, by the Republicans early on, through the Washington Free Beacon, which has a lot of Republican donors and the like. And then you sort of cross the other line where Christopher Steele was brought into this, former MI6 agent with a lot of Kremlin connections. That part of the story that the DNC apparently paid for is, in the latest information that we have, brings into question whether or not it's ethical for them to have gone over that line, paid a foreign entity for the research that they have. It's a thick wicket. Right. And what people forget is this it's not cricket. This salacious dossier, which is unverified, was so controversial at the time that news organizations refused to touch it, except for BuzzFeed, which posted it and claimed, well, we don't know whether it's true or not. We just think it should be out there. Obviously, some organizations, and I have to now include the Free Beacon, were more interested in damaging certain candidates than they were in trying to aggressively report on them. Brings to mind the issue of fake news, which is also in your bailiwick in terms of covering real journalism and fake news, right? This is pretty fake in that it is not journalism. I mean, the opposition research firm might have found some things that are true, but when you hide the funding, you are putting yourself behind a curtain, and you're not being straight with readers, viewers, followers online, because you've put money in the game and they don't know it. Yeah, and as we know, the
bank records of Fusion GPS have been requested by Congress, and they gave them a deadline of Monday morning at 9 o'clock. So some of this information was about to start spilling out, and what we usually see is that people try to get ahead of it. So that appears to be a bit of a Friday night dump from the Washington Free Beacon in terms of trying to diffuse this over the weekend and get this information out tonight before it is potentially revealed on Monday or heading into next week. Howie, thank you.
Exactly
thank you very much. Yeah, good to see you tonight. Thanks for coming in.